Hey folks, Lachlan here again, speaking to you as always from just outside of Durban, South Africa. Today I'm going to talk about one of the hot topics in South African social life at the moment, and that is going to be the topic of land, and specifically the legacy of land ownership during apartheid and its consequences in 2025. Now, if you know anything about current South African affairs, then you will understand that the issue of land and who should own it is a contentious one. And this is for many complex reasons that I'm going to do my best to explain. For black people, the subject of land ownership seems almost to be a spiritual issue, and they don't feel, or I won't speak for all black people, obviously, but many don't seem to feel as though they will be whole as human beings unless they own land. And the ANC and other political parties in South Africa have seized on this and used that feeling as a political tool of manipulation to drive further division and hatred among the people of South Africa. For their own benefit, of course, because when South Africa remains divided by race, nobody is really paying attention to how much they steal from public funds. So they use it as a very useful tool to keep everyone distracted from their crimes. A number of weeks ago, I was told by a black radical that as a white person who simply dares to exist in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, which I do, I had committed the crime of living on his stolen ancestral land, and he was going to take vengeance upon me for it. Now, I'm going to give you a brief history. KwaZulu-Natal is named after the Zulu tribe, probably one of the most well-known African tribes outside of South Africa because of the most famous Zulu chief in history, Shaka Zulu, who is widely acknowledged to be the greatest military leader that the Zulu nation ever produced. But something many people don't understand is that the Zulu tribe was not native to this part of Africa. In fact, they came here as a conquering force because, as I said, particularly under Shaka, they were militarily superior to the other tribes that they encountered, and they gave them a simple choice: either submit to Zulu rule or die. And most tribes simply chose to submit in order to survive. But the fact remains, the Zulus were never native to this part of Africa. So, to make the claim, as many young black Africans do, particularly if they are Zulu, the claim that by existing here, I'm living on stolen land. Okay, if you want to claim that, fine. But the Zulus took it first. And so now I'm going to get into the broader issue of land ownership in the modern context, particularly farming and agriculture. There is a massive cultural issue here in South Africa where, and this is constantly pushed by politicians in the ANC, EFF, and the MK, this narrative that white and particularly white Afrikaans farmers are evil and oppressive, and that they are hoarding farmland for themselves. That is not true. What many people don't realize is that South Africa has a functioning land claims court that has been arbitrating cases since the end of apartheid. And through that court, several farms have been redistributed into the ownership of black farmers. What we have seen, though, is that many of the redistributed farms have failed. And this is not because black farmers are incapable of doing the job. It is because, according to the word of the black farmers themselves, once they are given land, the government does not then back them up in terms of skills development, equipment, and capital resources. Also, one of the issues that's been found is that under these contracts, the government will often lease the farmland to black farmers. But in order to properly run a farm, you need to own it outright so that it can serve as collateral for loans every harvest season. There are other misconceptions that I want to clarify here. There is a general belief among many black South Africans that white farmers don't deserve what they have, and that being a farmer is a relatively easy job that doesn't require much effort, skill, or basically hard work of any kind. That is not true. I'm going to go through just some of the things you need to understand in order to be a successful farmer. In order to farm land successfully, you need to understand things like weather conditions, soil quality, crop rotation, animal husbandry, and equipment repair. I say equipment repair because if, for example, you are a farmer and you have a combine harvester to harvest your crops, if that harvester breaks down, you are not going to want to send it off site to be repaired in a mechanic shop unless you absolutely have to. Because if you send heavy equipment like that away, you will lose a lot of time and productive hours while you wait for it to be repaired. So, as a farmer, you basically have to be at least functionally aware of how to repair the equipment that you use on a daily basis. Farmers also have to have a deep knowledge of finance, both on a personal level and a corporate level. If a farmer doesn't manage his books properly, he won't last long because it is very complicated in terms of what your harvest is, who it gets sent to, what each thing would be charged for per kilogram, for example, if you're running any kind of maize crop or whatever. Farmers need to know many, many things. It's not as simple as, okay, here's a piece of land, here's a few cows, here's a dozen chickens, there you go. That is a storybook fairy tale of what farming is, which does not match the reality of what it means to work in the profession. And so I hope that I have now made it clear to you that without the proper knowledge, owning land in South Africa is nothing more than being in possession of your own grave. Because if you don't know how to run a farm, all you really have is a large plot of land to die on. Another aspect of this that both the people in Parliament and the black radicals who support them like to ignore is the fact that under an organization called the Ngoyama Trust, the Zulu nation is in possession of millions of hectares of land, most of which stands unused because it is hoarded by the Zulu king for his own benefit. Now, I should explain. The Ngoyama Trust is an organization which is under the sole direction of the Zulu king, and it is intended to benefit the people of his tribe. But if you go back through the years, both under the current king and his predecessor, many Zulus have lodged complaints to the effect that the king is withholding the land from them and that if they want to use it, they have to pay him exorbitant rental fees and lease fees. The trust is supposed to be to the benefit of all Zulus, but that is not what has happened in practice. Once again, we have further proof that South Africa's leaders don't care about the well-being of average black South Africans. They only care about maintaining their own wealth, their own power, and their own positions by any means necessary. I encourage you to research everything I've talked about here for yourself. I don't expect you ever to just believe everything I say, but if you have access to the internet, you can look this stuff up. You don't need to believe me. As always, I hope that you find some value in this content. Look after yourselves, take care of each other, put South Africa first, and for now, farewell.